Thank you so much for attending. My name is Imesh Vaidya. I'm the Southwest Regional Director for AAHOA. And it's my pleasure, and I apologize, I have to read this from the phone. I didn't have it on paper. It's my pleasure to introduce Eugene Ryu. He is a shareholder at Littler, where he focuses on his practice on labor and employment law. Gene serves on the company's Diversity and Inclusion Council and is a frequent lecturer and a published author. Please give a warm AAHOA welcome for Gene Littler.
Good afternoon. Thanks, everybody. We've got a very exciting and action-packed 45 minutes for you. I'm going to first introduce my esteemed panel. I'm going to let them give a little bit of an introduction themselves. Start on my left with Whitney Mertz from TriNet.
Good afternoon. I'm Whitney Mertz. I'm a principal human capital consultant with TriNet. I've been working in human resources for next year will be 25 years. Have spent several years of that time working either in-house, as in-house HR for hospitality, or working directly now consulting with hospitality companies.
And we are exceptionally fortunate to have Whitney here. She is a true HR leader and an experienced professional coming from a lot of different companies, including, I think, the Home Depot, as well as other large corporate entities. In addition, to my far right, we have Nehal Anand. Nehal?
Hi, everyone. My name's Nehal Anand. I work at the law firm of Littler Mendelson, and our law firm exclusively practices labor and employment law. So we represent employers when they get sued, or we help employers with employee issues or handbooks or whatever else you need when you're dealing with employees. So it's great to be here. I've been at the firm for about 8 years. I spoke at the regional conference, and I'm fortunate and happy to be at the national one here today. You know, we often just get calls when something goes wrong, so it's great to be here and get to talk to you about issues to make sure that something doesn't go wrong in the long term.
And last but not least, and I was told the fan section over here should keep it down for Mirage, but last but not least is Miraj Patel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miraj Patel. I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm a hotel and lodging management major from Johnson & Wales University in Miami, Florida. I'm a lifetime member, a proud lifetime member of AAHOA, and I'm on the Education and Professional Development Committee for AAHOA.
And Miraj is being a little bit too modest. I know he's you are the youngest ever lifetime member of AAHOA and has received several accolades and is only 19 years old and already on this panel and clearly a leader of your organization. So just...
Thank you.
And I'm Gene Ryu. I'm a shareholder from Littler Mendelson. Littler's the largest labor and employment law firm in the world. We've got offices all over the United States, in Europe, South America, partnerships in Asia, and all other parts of the world. I've been practicing for 17 years. Happy to be here today. We're going to walk you through a wide variety of things. Some quick ground rules. We're going to save questions towards the end. We're going to try to build some time for you guys. If by chance we don't get through all your questions at the end, all of us will be available for you afterwards. We're more than happy to hang out and answer any questions. If you'd like, I understand they're going to have a sign-up list where you can get a copy of our slides. So no need to have to take down notes furiously. Please take your time, pay attention, take in all the information. In addition, TriNet and Littler have prepared some other materials as well. Whitney's got this great list of behavioral interview questions, which are really thoughtful and smart questions that you can ask in the interview process. We also have a list of questions that you should ask at interviews and that you should not ask at interviews. So we're happy to give all those to you as well. Either sign up at the list, which I understand will be happening at the door, or find one of us, give us your business card, and we'll be happy to send you the information. Okay, so today's format's going to be a little bit different, I understand, than what you normally do. So we're going to have a little bit of a brief introduction of the materials. We'll start with an overview, a really high-level overview of the hiring process, followed by some short scenarios. And our esteemed panel here is going to act through some of these scenarios. There are going to be 4 hiring scenarios. The first one's going to be the hiring of a housekeeper. Next will be the hiring of a food and beverage manager, followed by the hiring of a general manager, and lastly, a front desk person. And in each of those scenarios, there will be a whole minefield of bad questions that you hear. And part of your job as the audience will be to identify what were the bad questions. And we'll help you understand why they were bad questions, and we'll help you understand how you can turn those into good questions. And the title of this presentation is Hiring and Firing to Increase Your Profitability. Quite frankly, we're going to teach you what not to say, which is going to save you tons of money, it's going to prevent you from having liability, and give you a lot of options in the way you hire people. So real quick, we'll start with the overview, or the fundamentals of what you need to know for hiring. And the biggest thing when it comes to job applicants is you want to avoid being accused of unlawful discrimination. And basically what that means is if you've made a hiring selection because of a protected category, or failed to make a hiring selection because of a protected category. And so everybody's asking, what's the million-dollar question? What's a protected category? Well, a protected category, quite frankly, is a reason you shouldn't hire somebody or fire somebody based solely upon their gender, their sex, their race, their ancestry, their color. And this list that you see up here on my left are all of the federally protected categories. So what does that mean? That means the US government has their own list, and every single state has a supplemental list. You can rely on these to be categories on which you should not make decisions solely, but also every state is going to have a little bit of a different wrinkle. So for example, at the bottom of this slide, we have this question about sexual orientation. And technically, under the federal law of Title VII, sexual orientation is not a federally protected category. There are some recent cases that come out that have given some protection, but those are based upon the protection based on sex. In states like California, New York, sexual orientation is protected, as well as gender identity. And so you'll find that as you go through, and depending upon where your properties are located, you'll have additional rules on top of these that you'll have to comply with. So what does all this mean? This really means we should be doing our homework before we come into these interviews. You should know what you want to ask, and you should know what you need out of the job. And to help you do that, figure out what do you want to ask during the interview, what are you going to document from the interview, are you being consistent, do you have a good job description, how are you setting compensation, are you taking notes? At the end of the day, the more you prepare for your interview, the better off you will be, and the more consistent you are with your interviews, the better off you'll be as well. So for example, take the last point, how are you setting compensation? If you find that across a job category like housekeepers, some housekeepers are getting paid more than others, but there's really no rhyme or reason to it, it sets you up for a potential discrimination claim, or a variety of other claims that might arise from an allegation that you're treating one group differently or better than another group. So always be careful about that. Oh, there we go. Okay, and before the interview, go through the candidate's resume, go through the job application, take a look at their different qualifications, see if there's any gaps in their employment. And a lot of people like to go onto Facebook, take a look at people, go onto LinkedIn. Be careful about that. People put oftentimes sensitive information onto their Facebook or LinkedIn profiles. You may find that somebody has a disability. You may find about somebody's sexual orientation or religion. And oftentimes those sites show you who visited. They tell you about cyberstalkers, so beware, don't be a cyberstalker. If you're going on and looking at an applicant's website, their Facebook page, their LinkedIn profile, you potentially are opening yourself up to other forms of discrimination where the applicant might say, you learned about these things by visiting these sites. All right, so we're going to get right into this. Our first scenario is the hiring of a new housekeeper, and Miraj will be the employer, the interviewer, and Whitney will be the housekeeper.
Hello, how are you?
Great, thanks. It's nice to meet you. My name's Whitney.
We are really excited to interview you for our housekeeping position. We are really looking for someone with a lot of energy, a real go-getter.
A real go-getter, huh? Well, okay.
Yeah, so we need someone vibrant with a lot of energy.
I understand.
So we also use technology to make our housekeepers' job more efficient. We provide them all tablets where we can track inventory when they restock the rooms with you, and we can track how much time they take turnover from each room. Will you be able to keep up with our technology?
I think so.
Generally, we usually only interview those right out of college. Our job posting says recent graduates preferred. By the way, how old are you?
Is my age really necessary for the job?
So I already heard some groans from the audience, so clearly you guys know the last question was no good. But this is the hospitality industry. Is it really that bad to ask that somebody should be energetic and vibrant? Whitney, what do you think?
Well, definitely being energetic and being enthusiastic is important in the hospitality industry. So what we really want to think about is, okay, for this job, what do we really need, and how do we build questions around what we truly need the person to be skilled at for the job? But we also want to be aware of the types of phrases that might unintentionally discriminate against somebody based upon their age. So as Gene mentioned, there are several protected categories, and one of them is age. The ADEA, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, does protect those individuals 40 years of age and older. So we want to be careful about phrases like energetic, enthusiastic, and did you hear that recent graduates preferred? Yes. So we want to be really careful in an interview and certainly in a job ad as well that we're not unintentionally keeping our older applicants away.
And Whitney, there was this question about the technology and things like that. Why was that bad?
There could be an implication there that because I'm older, I'm not as equipped or ready to deal with new technology. So again, that could be pushing away our older applicants.
And then the audience all groaned when the question came up, how old are you? But
I
really,
groaned too, by the way, so I didn't really want to hear that.
Why can't I ask about your age?
Again, under the EDEA, then it's not okay to discriminate against somebody based upon their age. So prior to hiring them, you would not want to inquire about their age. That's one of those bad questions we want to avoid.
And so one of the things we talked about offline a little bit, and we'll get to some of the better questions, there are a lot of older workers in the workforce, a lot of baby boomers, a lot of people who, from the crash in the economy, are forced to continue working. From your perspective and what you've been seeing, are these age claims, these age issues, something that's really important?
They are, and they can be very expensive to your company if you do have to defend them. So again, it's so important not to look at the person's age, but look at what are the requirements of the job, what do you really need them to do, and can this individual, through your interview process, perform those essential functions of the job?
And so we gave some lists of better questions, but I think one that got missed was really, I think the root of that how old are you question went to, you've got somebody a little bit older that's applying to be a housekeeper. It's a pretty strenuous job. A lot of people might assume that's a better job for a younger worker. What are the problems there?
Well, first, we don't want to assume, right? Because we all know a whole lot of people older than ourselves who do a heck of a lot better job getting around, right? So it's really important that we identify what does this job need to do and ask questions pertinent to that. A job description is a tremendous benefit and really is sort of the foundation of all of the questions that you want to ask in your interview.
Is there a better way to get to that question?
A better way than, how old are you?
Yes.
So, can you perform the essential functions of the job? And here they are.
Okay. And that's better because clearly it's related to the job and the duties.
Rather than my age.
Perfect. And we've got a few other questions here geared, I think, towards the software or the programming. Explain to us, how are these better than the questions during the interview?
Sure. So when Miraj asked me, hey, by the way, do you think you can handle it? Okay, again, that could imply that because of my age, I'm not going to be able to take on new technology. But what if we just directly ask the applicant, tell me about a time when you've had to learn new technology at work? Or are you able to utilize this software that we're utilizing?
Thank you. I'm sorry, guys, this keeps toggling off for me. There we go. Okay, our next set of interviews is going to be of a food and beverage manager, and Nehal will be the interviewer, and Whitney will be the candidate.
Before we get started real quick, I see a bunch of people sitting in the back. There's about at least 10 chairs up here. If someone wants to come closer to us, we want her to. So, hi Whitney, thanks for coming in. You're interviewing for our food and beverage manager, right?
I am. I'm really excited. I have lots of experience in this, and I've actually done the same position in another hotel for 3 years.
Oh, okay. Well, our last food and beverage manager had so many issues with childcare. It was a problem for us because she missed so much work. Do you have any children, Whitney?
Well, yes, but it's not going to affect my ability to do my job.
Well, how many children do you have?
2, but again, I'm not sure how this is relevant to my job.
Well, just asking, who takes care of your children after school?
My children are young, so I have a nanny that watches them while I'm at work.
A nanny, is that reliable? I mean, would it be better to have family watch your kids?
My nanny is very reliable.
Okay, well, do you prefer to be called Miss or Mrs.?
Yeah, again, not sure why that matters, but I prefer Ms.
So, are you married?
Yes, but I don't see why that matters.
Well, I just thought that having a spouse would make things easier with childcare and all, you know?
I love this audience. You guys have great reactions. It's fantastic. You guys already know everything. Nehal, as an employer, I want to make sure my employees can come to the job and don't have excuses that are going to take them away. Why can't I ask them those kinds of questions?
And you absolutely can ask questions that are designed to help you figure out whether or not that employee can be there. But it can't be indirectly, you know, do you have children that are going to prevent you from doing it? Is your husband going to let you work overtime? You know, as Whitney mentioned earlier, figure out what you need to know, what your business reason for knowing that information is, and ask it that way. You know, better to ask, you know, are you able to work overtime? Sometimes we might need overtime hours. Is that going to be an issue? Instead of prying into, you know, what their childcare situation might be.
So back when we had that list of the protected categories, I don't remember seeing children as a protected category. So why can't I ask about this?
You know, and technically, you're right, Gene. Children and marriage is not a federally protected category, though marriage in some jurisdiction is a protected category, depending on where your operations are. But both of those issues go to sex, which is a protected category, and possibly sexual orientation. If you're making your decisions based on someone's marital status or your perception that because they're married or because they have kids, they won't be able to do the job as well, then that will open the door to a discrimination lawsuit down the road.
And some of these questions going to marriage, in some jurisdictions, Nehal, do they also open the door up for sexual orientation?
Absolutely, right? So if you're asking, hey, what does your husband do? Do you have a husband? You know, if they end up saying, no, I don't have a husband, but I have a lifelong partner, and you don't hire them, and let's say you don't hire them for a particular, you know, very legitimate reason, maybe they weren't as experienced as someone else down the road, then yes, that might be a defensible decision when you're faced with a lawsuit. But do you want to go there? Do you want to be in a situation where you're having to fight a lawsuit because you asked an inappropriate question that implicated potentially one of the sexually protected categories? You probably don't.
So can you walk us through some of the better questions that you could ask while getting to the same point?
Sure. So, you know, if you're interested in making sure they're going to be available at all the hours that you need them to, it's best to say, look, our working hours are from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. You know, are you able to work these hours? Do you have any commitments that prevent you from doing it? You can say typically, you know, our housekeepers work overtime 3 times a week. Are you able to do that? And then, you know, you can always ask an emergency contact information, either in the interview or through some sort of subsequent form that you give them after you hire them.
Thank you, Nehal. And let's see if the audience can keep up and flag the bad issues coming up here with the hiring of our general manager. And Miraj, you're going to be the interviewer, is that right?
Correct.
And Nehal, you're the GM?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in today. Great to meet you, Nehal.
Great to also meet you, Miraj.
As an assistant GM now at your current property, your schedule must be busy, right?
Yeah, but I'm glad I made time for the interview.
Thanks. I noticed that you had a bit of a limp walking into the room. Are you okay?
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Was that from work?
No, totally separate, not a big deal.
Well, have you ever filed for workers' comp?
Does it matter?
I mean, how many sick days did you take at your last job?
I'm not sure. Can you tell me why this matters?
Listen, I just want to make sure that you won't have any problems for attendance. Do you have any medical problems?
Well, no, not really.
Well, do you have any disabilities that would prevent you from doing the job here?
No.
Well, what about that limp? Does your physical condition make you less skilled for this job?
And Mirage, from your perspective, as a business owner, what are the things that you look for when you're hiring people?
Well, when you're hiring a GM, right, you're looking for experienced, knowledgeable, a team player, but most importantly, you're looking for someone that's reliable because they're next in line. We know that the hospitality industry, right, specifically hotel industry, is a 24/7 business. So no owner wants to be stuck. There's a reason why we hire a GM, so that there's somebody second in line, so that if there's any potential issues, they're there to take care of it. So what you need to do is have to get things clarified beforehand so that you avoid potential issues later on and even avoid compliances like these.
So Whitney, I'm going to turn to you a little bit. If the GM's such an important job, why can't I ask about this limp and any possible disability?
So you see an obvious limp, or you see something obvious. While we don't want to ask about that specific condition, we can certainly ask about how the person and how the person would perform the essential duties of the job.
And again, that takes it back to being job-related, right?
It's job-related, exactly.
And no hotel owner wants to inherit a workers' comp claim, right? I already know. So Nehal, why can't we ask about prior workers' comp history?
So most jurisdictions have a statute that prohibits employers from retaliating against an employee because they filed a workers' comp claim or they said they were going to. Retaliating meaning, you decide they're about to file a workers' comp claim, or they told me they're about to, let's just go ahead and get rid of you next month. I'm pretty sure you were having performance issues anyway. So the idea that you can ask about workers' comp history to somehow prevent them from having a workers' comp claim is a myth. To begin with. It's very likely that someone got injured on the job and it was for a very legitimate reason at their prior employer. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to file a workers' comp claim at your company, but more importantly, that question raises the inference and it puts it in their head that, are they asking me this question because they have an issue with people who file workers' comp? So fast forward 3 months later, if they file a workers' comp claim and you happen to have a company-wide layoff and you let them go, what is that employee going to think? Oh, they let me go because I filed a workers' comp claim.
Okay, and here are some of the better questions you can ask. Whitney, you got to some of these about the essential functions. We've got an interesting thing up here about job-related physicals. All of our job offers are contingent upon passing a job-related physical examination. Whitney, in conjunction with your work with TriNet, how does TriNet usually handle this type of situation?
So if you have a position where you would want to have some sort of physical examination, first thing is that we're consistent in how we're applying that. We're consistent with the position and with your final applicants. And that would really be the primary focus.
Great. All right, one more interview. Keep the groans coming. We want to hear from you guys. And here's an interview of a front desk applicant. Whitney will be the interviewer. Miraj will be the applicant.
Hi, Miraj. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Oh, well, that's an interesting accent. What country are you from?
I'm from India.
India, that's cool. We get some Indian guests, but are you a U.S. citizen?
Well, no, but I understood that it's not required for this job.
Well, you do speak English very well for someone from another country, but is English your first language?
No, but I'm pretty fluent in English. Having a bilingual front desk person would actually be a plus because I can communicate with lots of different guests.
That's a really good point. So what religious holidays do you need to take?
Pardon me?
Well, you know, being from another country, I just assume that you might need to take some religious holidays.
Okay, I don't need to take any special religious holidays.
Okay, well, there's been a lot of stuff in the news, so I thought I would ask. So, have you ever been convicted of any crimes?
No. Would you like to know about my skills or why I'm otherwise qualified for this job?
Absolutely.
And Whitney, doesn't somebody that's working for you have to be a U.S. citizen?
Absolutely not. What they need to be is authorized to work in the United States, not a U.S. citizen.
And you mentioned this thing about religious holidays and things, and certainly accommodations do need to be made in some instances. How's the best way to handle that?
So first of all, we don't want to assume, of course, that somebody needs religious holidays. Should someone possibly need accommodation in that way, then it's a matter of speaking with the employee and understanding what their needs are and looking at, does this cause an undue hardship for our company, or is it truly something that we can work with the employee?
And there was this question about convictions.
Yeah, there's that.
And it sounds like it's a bad question because it's on our slide. Can I get around this? Instead of asking the question, why can't I just make them do a background check?
So where the questions about convictions or where background checks fall in your interview process is going to be regulated quite heavily by some laws that you might have heard of called ban the box or the fair chance laws. And the key about this is it's not at a federal level yet. So there's a lot of variation between states and even within municipalities. So it's important to understand what are the regulations in the area in which you're operating and to follow those guidelines.
Can you walk us through some of the better ways to ask these questions? So for example, if I want to know about accommodating a religious holiday, how should I ask that?
So again, we come back to what do you really need to know? What we need to know is, can this person meet the requirements of the job? If you are a 7-day-a-week operation and that requires that people are able to work Saturdays and Sundays, then the question is, are you available, are you able to work Saturdays and Sundays? Can you meet these requirements?
So after the interview, most of you will have been taking notes. Most of you will be keeping those notes. Those notes may be important for you if you're in a lawsuit and those notes show that you were relying upon job-related information, person didn't have enough experience, person didn't meet the qualifications in your job description, person didn't have some of the skills, and you took notes on that, that will look great for you and it'll be very defensible. But if your notes are showing other things, some of the questions that we talked about, some of the comments that we've talked about, that may prove to be problematic. So it is important for you to be careful in what you're documenting, how you're keeping it, and what you're doing with it. After the interview, you may, if you're in a lawsuit, be asked to explain why you chose one candidate over another, or to explain why you paid one candidate much more than another candidate. All of these are issues that have legal implications, and as we talked about in the beginning, if you're prepared and consistent across the board, it'll help you avoid a lot of these problems. One of the biggest problems we see is just an internal inconsistency. You've got the people in the same job, paid at different rates with no real rhyme or reason, and it tends to lead to claims that one group or class of people is being treated differently or better than another, and thus the group being treated less favorably is being discriminated against. So please be careful. Now we're going to start talking about terminations. So just a quick high-level overview on terminations. Most of you, I understand, are familiar with this idea of at-will termination, meaning we can fire you for any or no reason, you can quit for any or no reason. I'm here to tell you, you should never rely on that. You should always have a reason. If you don't have a reason, the courts, the juries, the arbitrators, everyone will assume you acted on a bad reason. So make sure you have your reasons set up. When you have your reasons set up, make sure they make sense. Are they consistent with what you've done in the past? If they start looking different, if they start being out of line with what you've done, it might show that somebody was treated differently. A common frustration is, what was your final incident? A lot of times it's a lot of little things that add up, and you get to the point where I can't handle it anymore, I can't have this person working for me anymore. But you're still gonna need to point to one final incident that caused it. Whether it's somebody being late 5 or 6 times over the last 2 months, you're gonna have to tie it to that last tardiness, and your termination's gonna have to be close in time to that to prove the termination was really due to this ongoing issue. And then when you're firing somebody, you've got nothing to hide. Tell the truth. Either they weren't a good performer, they had failed to follow your policies. Provide the real reason. As business owners, you guys are all looking for the bottom line. And if somebody's not performing, if somebody's not meeting your expectations, if somebody's not keeping you profitable, be upfront, be transparent, and explain the reason for the termination. And then lastly, some people will not think about their plan if they terminate somebody and won't have a plan with respect to replacing people. It's important depending upon the reason that you gave. And so we're going to walk you guys through some other scenarios here. And we're going to have 3 different termination meetings. So the same interviewer-employee dynamic, and we'll have a housekeeper being terminated, the food and beverage manager that you saw being interviewed earlier today being terminated, as well as the front desk person. So for the housekeeper, we'll have Miraj again taking the role of the employer, and Whitney as the housekeeper.
Hey, Whitney, we need to talk.
Hey, Mirage, what's up?
Well, you've been with us less than the 90-day probationary period, and I'm finding that you're not a good fit.
Not a good fit? What do you mean? I've been meeting my quotas for rooms every day.
Well, it's just not fitting with our culture. I'm going to have to let you go.
Is this because I'm having a little difficulty with the tablet? I'm used to Mac devices instead of Android, but I'll get the hang of it.
No, sorry, you're just not a good fit. You can turn in your uniform now.
Oh.
So, Miraj, tell us, what are the problems there?
So, this is a very sensitive subject. So what I would do is everything that Gene just said, right? I'd keep a track record. If it's a 90-day probationary period, like in this example, then keep a track record of at least, so you break down 90, right? So you should have at least 3 track records of 30 days. And you should have proper evidence of what's going on and why you're having these issues, right? So when you need to present them, you have the proper reasonings behind it. So my suggestion is to keep a track record of what, and be consistent on everything that Gene just mentioned before is very important in this situation.
And Whitney, when Miraj kept saying it's not a good fit, is that just code for you're too old?
He sure was asking about my age a lot earlier, wasn't he?
Wink, wink.
So I don't know. I mean, the way it was described to me, it's you're just not a good fit. I don't know, right? So I am going to have to figure it out in my own mind. Well, gosh, what is it I could have done? Well, the only thing I really remember was my age thing seemed to really bother him during the interview process. So I might go there. That might be my understanding.
And you, as business owners, have to walk this fine line of giving the reason for the termination, which needs to be truthful and lawful, but at the same time, you're trying to be nice to people. These are their livelihoods. You're trying to take into account their feelings. You don't want to be overly cold, and so sometimes people use vague things like not a good fit to try to spare people feelings, but what you end up doing is getting a lawsuit. So in those situations, it's much better to give the reason, whether it's performance or whatnot, and go with the termination after that. And so our next one is going to be the food and beverage layoff, and that will be Nehal as the employer laying off Whitney.
Hey, Whitney, can I talk to you for a minute?
Sure, what's up?
Well, unfortunately, I need to lay you off as the food and beverage manager.
Layoff? What does that mean?
It means we're letting you go.
So I'm fired.
Well, yeah, but it's not your fault. It's just a layoff.
Okay, well, who else was laid off?
No one, really.
So this hotel has lots of weddings and lots of events. Are you just not going to have a food and beverage manager?
Oh, we haven't decided all that yet.
So if you haven't decided, why are you firing me or laying me off?
look, I'm trying to be nice, I'm trying to do you a favor. If I lay you off, you can go file for unemployment benefits. It's just not working out for us.
So Nehal, what is a layoff?
A layoff, you typically do a layoff when you have a headcount reduction. So if you have 10 housekeepers and as a business reason you can't support 10 housekeepers, then you can let 5 of them go. Or it's a position elimination. So let's say that as a hotel owner you decide you're not doing enough events to justify a food and beverage manager and you eliminate that position. That is typically how layoffs or position eliminations would work.
And when you do a layoff, the example had a layoff of one person. Is that allowed?
If it's a one-person layoff, then it should be a position elimination, and it needs to be a true position elimination, right? So if you have 5 housekeepers, eliminating one housekeeper is not a layoff, nor is it a position elimination. It will raise questions as to whether or not it's actually a layoff.
So we've laid off the food and beverage manager. Can I hire a new food and beverage manager 2 weeks later?
You can, and you will probably get sued for doing so. The reality is if you tell an employee it's a layoff, the idea is that it is a headcount reduction or position elimination. So, employees stay connected, and they will find out if someone took over their position later. And even though they were having performance issues, the fact that you classified it as a layoff at the termination meeting, well, you're stuck to that, and now you're having to explain to a court or a jury, why you're hiring someone else when really you told the employee it was a headcount reduction.
And when you're saying headcount reduction, fair to say layoff in most situations means the company can't afford your salary anymore, not that you did anything wrong.
Absolutely, right. So if you did something wrong, or if the employee did something wrong and there's a performance reason or misconduct reason, then that should be the reason that you give the employee. The reason shouldn't be it's a layoff. It should be we're having performance issues and we warned you about this 2 times ago, or you stole money out of the cash register, we're letting you go immediately.
Okay, and so our last termination meeting is going to be of the front desk person, and Whitney will be terminating Mirage.
Hey, Mirage, may I speak with you a minute?
Hey, Whitney. How can I help you?
Well, look, your work as a front desk person just hasn't been up to par.
Really? No one said anything.
Well, I've been watching, and your performance just doesn't meet our standards.
Well, have any guests complained?
Well, no.
Well, then can you at least give me examples of anything I did wrong?
Well, not really off the top of my head.
So then I don't know how you can fire me for performance if I've never got a review or even a write-up.
Thing is, we're still within the 90-day probationary period, so none of that matters.
Oh.
So, Whitney, one of the things we have on the slide is that the 90-day probationary period doesn't matter, or as you've told me before, it's just a myth. Explain that to us.
So the 90-day probationary period can be a very real thing. But what I mean by it's not a myth is, as a reason for a termination, it's not a myth. Really, the purpose behind a 90-day probationary period is because we know when we're hiring someone, when we're bringing them in new to the company or new to a position, they need time to learn the job, right? To learn what your standards are and to get ramped up to where they can perform to that level. So that's a period of a lot of additional supervision, a lot of additional coaching. And we know as a best practice, we're going to be documenting that coaching and documenting how that employee is doing throughout that 90-day period.
And in this situation, they point out they didn't get a review. Can you terminate somebody for performance if there's no review, no write-up, no documentation?
So as Gene mentioned earlier, if you do that, then you are leaving it wide open. You have no documentation to defend the reason that you did it.
And so from a business owner's perspective, Mirage, one of the things you've told me about is setting up a culture and a way you want your employees to feel and the job applicants to feel. So tell us why that is important from your perspective.
I think that the culture is the most important thing running a business, because to avoid all these legal compliances and issues and avoiding terminations, it's you need to make sure that your culture is fit from the start. You have to create a culture where not only are you succeeding, but everybody within your organization is succeeding. And that's something that I myself do in our company, is that we make sure that it's not me that's succeeding, but I'm also leaving a platform for our associates to have an area of growth and to develop as a person, so they're also succeeding as well. So I suggest that if you have a proper culture set up in the first place, none of these legal compliances and issues will even occur.
And you mentioned something to me earlier today, which is, if somebody applies for a job at your company or your hotel and they don't get it, you want them to leave with the feeling of, oh gosh, I'm going to reapply. I want to go back there. That was great. So you want to make sure they have a great experience from beginning to end, right?
That's correct. You want them to make sure that, man, I want to go back there and I want to work hard and make sure I come in and fit into that culture. You want to create that culture that you should make them feel, like Gene said, I mentioned this earlier to him, that you want to make sure that they want to come back and apply again, because this is the culture that we have.
Miraj, you mentioned creating this experience, and I fully agree with you. Let me ask you a question. When I was interviewing you and I was asking you questions about mentioning your accent and asking you where you're from and asking you about religious holidays, how did that make you feel about me and feel about my company?
See, then it becomes very sensitive, right? I become offended. But to be honest with you, right, in even my company, right, we make sure that we encourage the culture, the diversity, right? Because this is hospitality, right? You want to make sure that there's diversity within your organization, right? You want to be able to let people meet each other and make sure that they relate to each other. So as an owner's perspective, I would make sure that we encourage diversity, because I think that's the way you should be able to do it, right? It shouldn't be a problem.
Thanks, guys. So when you're terminating somebody, here's a few things that you should do. Bring a witness. Last thing you want is to be your word against theirs. So always have a witness with you, somebody that can corroborate what occurred. Figure out where you're going to do it. If you've got somebody that might be volatile, figure out if you need security. Determine the effective date. Do you want the termination to happen immediately? Are you giving them 2 weeks' notice? Have it all planned out in your head. Have mental talking points in your head. So if you're going to terminate somebody for performance, have some examples as to what they did wrong. Have in your mind the last straw that caused you to need to terminate them. And have all the materials that you need. Some jurisdictions will require that you give them their final pay at the time of termination. Some jurisdictions will require that you give them information about unemployment. Make sure you know what's required in your state to give to an employee at the time that they're being terminated. Okay, I know we have a couple more minutes, so we're happy to take a few questions, and if we run over, I understand we can answer some questions afterwards as well.
Definitely. Any pressing questions we can start with?
Could you be able to specify the culture, or how we define culture?
I think that the culture should be your core values, right? You got to make sure that you implement proper core values and a support for growth inside your culture so that they're happy as well as you are. You want to make sure that your values are properly done from the first time when you create the for the first time you create the organization, right? Some of the common core values are like honesty, integrity, right? Teamwork, unity, vision. There's so many of them, right? But you have to make sure that you pick the proper ones that will match the culture that you're envisioning.
One last question, and then we'll move it outside. Sorry, she had hers first.
When you take over a new property, are you obligated to hire everybody, or can you pick and choose who you want to hire from the previous employer?
Some of it will depend upon the terms of your buy-sell agreement, but you're not legally obligated to hire everybody. You can pick and choose, but your process should be consistent. You should be interviewing everybody and having a game plan as to what you're looking for, who you're hiring and why. And again, you should be careful of some one-offs. So if you've got a staff of 15 housekeepers and you're hiring everybody but one, you're bound to get questions from that one as to why they're not being hired.
I apologize, we're out of time. I know there's plenty of other questions. The panel will be available. We'll try to get you a room. If not, they'll be outside definitely. Those of you that want this presentation, if you'll let us know. If you were scanned, we'll send it to you. If you were not scanned, please come up, give us your email. We'll make sure you get it. And I believe this presentation will also be online at AAHOA.com. So can we give our panel and our moderator a round of applause? And I owe Gene an apology. I mentioned the last name is Gene Ryu. I do have small gestures of token gifts for you guys. Please don't leave.